about the recovery efforts on Maui, the green fee, as well as affordable housing. Just some of the topics we'll be discussing with Governor Josh Green today.
He is our guest in studio. Submit your questions live on our Facebook page right now. Spotlight Now starts now.
You're watching Spotlight Now with Ryan Kalei-Suji and Yunji Denise on Hawaii News Now. Have questions or comments for our guests? Join the conversation in our Facebook live stream. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. Just like how we always like to start the month, we'd like to welcome in Governor Josh Green, who joins us live here in studio. But before we get to the governor, we want to encourage all of you watching online or on air that you can actually submit questions for the governor, engage in the conversation. You can scan the QR code that you see there at the bottom of your screen, or of course, head over to Facebook and enter your comments in the Facebook comment section of our Facebook page at Hawaii News Now. But again, we want to welcome in Governor Josh Green. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Well, great to see you. And of course, we want to start with Maui. I know that a lot of your efforts have been focused there over the last 6 months. Thursday is a grim milestone. We mark 6 months since those devastating wildfires. What can you tell us about housing? Let's start there, as we often do, about how many folks are still in need and how much progress you've made.
Yes, so thank you for that. It is a central focus of all that we're doing right now. Housing was already central statewide, and so the Maui challenge is just enormous. 6 months on Thursday. We had, if you want people to remember the big picture, we had 3,000 families displaced, which amounted to about 12,000 individuals from the fire. And we have, since the fire started, first put people into hotels. You knew about that. That was just under 8,000 individuals. And now gradually moving people into long-term housing is the goal. So we now have moved 36% of those that were in short-term hotels, hotel rooms, into long-term rentals. So 36%. That means that we went from 7,796 people in hotels. As of this morning, we got it down to 4,984. So we have a long way to go, but there is some good news. We have now gotten contracts for many short-term rentals converted to long-term rentals. So it breaks down kind of like this. We have this other 2,000 families to steadily move into long-term arrangements, and the feds have 1,415 units available. So out of those 2,000 families, we have 1,415 available. Then also my Department of Human Services has 300 additional units that they are in contract with and beginning to move people to. And on top of that, we have CNHA and their effort, which has been extraordinary. So we're getting close. By last count, as of this morning, we were just under 2,400 available long-term rentals to put people into, and we need about 3,000. There's one other thing I should comment on. Approximately 400 families can likely move back into their homes that were outside of the burn zone, but were either blocked from going there, or there was a problem with their power or their water. Those things are being remedied or have been fixed. So truthfully, we're about 2,400 out of 2,600 available. People are getting the background checks done. We're keeping people housed until they're into long-term accommodations, and then we'll start building. So there's a lot of progress, but I know it can't happen fast enough for people. Over the next 5 to 6 weeks, we hope to move another 1,000 families into these long-term rentals and get them back into a normal life.
And so if you can maybe just expand a little bit more, because there have been those talks of that. You said that you would go into the point if you needed to use emergency powers to require some of these individuals who have these short terms to force them over. Do you feel confident, or do you feel optimistic that maybe you don't have to exercise that, given the rate at which we are seeing housing become available right now?
Well, it's a big improvement since a month ago when we spoke. I was less optimistic then. I'm much more optimistic now that we will get enough units and not have to use this, quote, nuclear option. But I do want to expand on that. So we still need 500 units, just for argument's sake, because some people will have second thoughts. Other people will just refuse to go to a certain house that's too far away from the school and so on. So we need about 500 more short-term rentals to convert to long-term rentals. We'll pay the full boat, and they'll get the tax break, remember, from property taxes. So please do write in. We've been using the email Maui Housing 2024 at fema.dhs.gov. Now, they have enough for their program, but they're shifting them over to us at the state. So contact us, contact the Red Cross and other folks that are on the ground there if you will, consider renting your unit. Now, having said all that, though, we still have a massive problem, and it's going to be tough in 2 years also. We've done some deep dives into the short-term rental challenge that we have. And I know I shared at the State of the State address some data, like, for instance, 52% of short-term rentals are owned by people on the mainland, or 27% of those who own short-term rentals own 20 or more units. Well, we now know how many properties are in short-term rentals statewide. It's 89,693, 89693. And guess how many of those are essentially illegal? 74,000 of them. Okay, so 74,000 of the short-term rentals aren't on the legal platforms that are paying their taxes and whatnot. They're not somehow fully, credentialed and approved. That's 74,000 units of housing that our local families need. And on Maui, the number is a little higher than we thought. It's actually 31,000 short-term rentals. So you know how I was saying, look, if just 10% would come, we'd be fine? Well, that was about right, because 10% of 31,000 would be 3,100. So what we need to do is we do need to move a fair number of those short-term rentals into local ownership. That will be great. Or just local long-term rental capacity. So that would also be quite good. And that has to happen kind of soon. We'll solve the Maui problem in the short term, but the much longer play requires the legislature and the councils in each of the counties to really get super duper serious on converting these short-term rentals. And that means probably much higher taxation, prohibitions on perhaps running them from afar. New York just did some significant legislation. My understanding is that they dropped their number of short-term rentals by over 85% really quickly. So housing markets that are tight, like Hawaii, Maui in particular, New York, Paris, these places, they're not taking care of their people adequately. And so that's what we have to do.
Well, kind of building on that, it sounds like you won't have to use the moratorium for Maui in this circumstance. Hopefully, those 500 will cross over. But do you still sort of reserve the right to do that if the kinds of adaptations that you're talking about, the legislation that would be necessary, does not pass this session?
Yeah, there's going to be a couple key moments. First, of course, getting all of these families into long-term housing is our primary goal. And that appears to be happening pretty well. Plus, we're going to start building some transitional housing where we will immediately house individuals that were somehow not approved by FEMA or on the bubble and not getting all the care they needed. So we'll do that pretty quickly. That takes 6 or 8 months. But afterwards, after we pass like the 18-month mark where FEMA's providing all this extra support, paying for the rents, and we're paying for people's rents, we're going to have a big problem. We refer to that as the housing cliff. And at that point, I hope people don't think that we're going to be able to continue to pay the $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 a month for these rentals. We just can't do it. It's one thing when it's a natural disaster and we're helping people through a long period of time. It's another thing just to be responsible, in the long run with taxpayer dollars. And so we need these conversions. I'm going to ask people to get out of the market, out of the short-term rental market, and sell their properties to local folks. And in the process of doing that, we will waive, this is the bill I promoted or proposed, we will waive their capital gains tax and their conveyance tax, which will save them, like 15%. And so it's fine. We weren't going to get that tax anyway if they didn't shift. And they were probably an illegal Airbnb anyhow, or illegal rental anyway, based on these numbers. Take that money and please go and buy somewhere else. Do what you want to do with your money, but sell the property to someone that will either be living here or will rent to a local family at a normal rate.
And just to kind of expand upon this, what about for those local residents who, exercise and participate in this sort of income generation where maybe a local person does have 4 or 5 properties, and they use it as a way to make income by doing these rentals as a means for their own business. How would you regulate, or how would you try to accommodate those local individuals who use this as a means for their own income?
Well, first, if they're legal, if they are a part of the 15,000 legal properties, they're probably doing what we hope, which is to have their properties in the entertainment and hotel districts. That's the better way to go about it. And I don't want to be cruel here, but I do want to be direct about the challenge. If people are renting several houses out and they're doing it for vacationers, that means we don't have those houses for nurses or teachers or firefighters or whoever else is somewhere in the middle class. I understand it's a good business. You know, people are making 400% of what they'd make for regular rentals, but we can't afford it from a housing perspective. And so what I would say to those individuals is strongly consider selling some of those properties, taking the tax windfall, using that towards your kids' tuition or investing in other local businesses. But please strongly consider returning those housing units to the local market. We have to do that. If we don't, we're going to continue to see kind of this inflationary pressure on everything else. It's going to be very hard for regular people to find affordable housing. And that means it's going to be harder for hospitals to hire nurses and doctors. And it's going to be harder for everybody to charge us regular kind of rates. And so we get this Hawaii inflation that damages all of us because people are taking a big profit. And I know that sounds a little bit like I'm demonizing wealthy people. I'm not. I'm just saying we don't have enough houses. And when interest rates were very low, people scooped up who had cash. They scooped up extra housing, and they started making $15,000 a month instead of $4,000 for regular rentals. And that meant a lot of people became housing unstable.
Okay, so what you're talking about with these tax incentives, and I'm sure they are attractive to some folks, is really a carrot approach, right? So where's the stick? There are lawmakers who have now, proposed legislation that would make it illegal, let's say, for a foreign buyer or severely restrict a mainland buyer from coming into the market. Do you think those mechanisms are possible? Do you think they're appropriate?
Well, the things that you're referencing are categorically unconstitutional. So that makes it a problem because they're not really serious proposals. They are populist in a way because they sound great, but we're not allowed to discriminate based on people's residence across our country. There's a thing called the Interstate Commerce Clause, and so you just are not allowed to do it. So that's not going to happen because it's unconstitutional. However, I am in favor of putting extra, mechanisms in place to help people buy houses if they're part of the essential workforce. We can do a few things on loans. We can help loan money to people who are committed to working and staying here. It otherwise is very difficult legally. It's popular because people spout off and it sounds great, but we do have to follow the law. Now, there is a place where we can be discriminating, and that is with Department of Hawaiian Homelands. So you're going to see me really rev DHHL properties on Maui, for example, things that were already approved, just want to get them going faster. So Kali Watson is going to move forward with some of those projects, which creates a lot of extra housing inventory. There were hundreds of millions of dollars that was already appropriated for DHHL, and by doing that, it takes down pressure all over. I also am very much in favor of having people build Ohana units, the alternative dwelling units, ADUs, on their property and renting them out all across the state. It's pretty low impact. We already have the water infrastructure at those houses, and then it creates a way for people to rent to local individuals at their discretion. You can rent to whoever you want when you own your property. That's the way I think we want to give people benefit. I really don't want to, take a shot at people who float bills that just aren't allowed. I'm sure I did that plenty of times when I was a senator and a rep. The point is well taken, that we want to focus on our local families. We just have to do it so that we don't get sued and get stuck in court for 5 years and then lose. So I'm aware of the rules.
I want to circle back on Maui as we talk about this transition period between just getting families and people back into houses. Once that phase is complete, and I know you're looking forward to that day when everyone kind of has it settled in this short-term rental. What does that next phase look like for those who have been displaced? Because this has been the focus since the fires, is just getting people into these permanent houses. But we know that there is a long process and road ahead, as well as support that will continue to be needed for these families and individuals. What does phase 2 look like in that scenario?
So phase 2 overlaps somewhat with phase 1. So part of phase 2 is completed, like the EPA going through in the course of 4 months and cleaning out every property, which was just amazing, and getting toxic chemicals out. And then the Army Corps of Engineers, we authorized their contract right away. They're now clearing debris, and I think they've already finished 56 properties, which is amazing also. They're going to do this between now and say like 6 to 9 months or so from now. They've gotten good success on right of entry, ROE. That's 95% of the families have said you can come in now and clean up the property. And the goal here is to get those properties cleaned out so that when we put the new water lines in and we put the power lines back in, the mayor can grant permits really fast. Remember, there's 561 families out of what were about 2,400 families that were living in Lahaina. 561 were owner-occupiers. In other words, they own their property. They probably paid it off a long time ago. Families from generation to generation have lived there. We want to get those guys permits really fast and help them rebuild. And then the other 1,800 people or so who were renters, we want, whatever Lahaina wants. It depends how much people want to rebuild. Some people will take their insurance and sell their property eventually, hopefully to local families. I have had a moratorium in place on people soliciting purchases. We've still been blocking that, but sooner or later, everyone's going to make their own mind up about what they want to do with their property. So that's the next phase. Now, if you want specifics, a couple things have been authorized already. I've already authorized 500 transitional housing units that the state is covering. We signed a memorandum of understanding with some great partners, with the Hawaii Community Foundation, the county, CNHA, and the feds. We all came together. We put $500 million together. 150s from the state, 250s from the feds, and then the other guys filled in very generously. We are going to do $500 million of transitional housing, either renting for long periods of time for people so they're stable, or actually building these 500 units on Leali'i. That's where we're going to do 500 units from the state. There is Kanapali 2020, which we believe the federal government's going to take, and there's going to be 50 units in Kapalua going in quite soon. Actually, we're going to do a groundbreaking in about 2 weeks, and we need to get to thousands of units. I would say if we don't build at least 2,000 units, we're going to have a very difficult time 2.5 years from now. So Senator Schatz, the mayor, and I humbly asked the feds to do 1,000 units, and we're kind of sticking to that number. Granted, these are big asks, but that happens. And then what's referred to as HUD DR money, or Housing and Urban Development Disaster Relief money, comes in, and that could be $500, $600 million that the county will have the capacity to build a lot of housing with. But remember how hard it is to build on Maui, because we always have the challenge with water rights. So none of this is going to be easy.
Building on what you said about there being some restrictions on who can trade property right now, our viewer Jeannie, using the QR code, mahalo for that, says, will there be any restrictions on corporations buying up properties in Lahaina town? There is so much concern that there will be a land grab. It's been the concern from day one. What do you say to Jeannie this afternoon?
I'd say that is a great concern, but the stuff on social media is a total phantom, and those guys are nuts. We're doing the exact opposite, actually. We've been talking to people, including some of the corporations like the Weinberg Foundation. They are offering to help us and move land to people, not away from them. These were large landowners before. There is also apparently a hui of about 40 landowners that are getting together and would like to build more units. But these are not corporations. These are people who just owned a couple properties. So I would love to see people build back the way they did before. That's probably the easiest thing. And then apply the state and county land into kind of this common trust where people can do a lot more environmental protection, deal with the ahupua'a question, which is restoring it, basically. Those kind of things would be good for us. I think it's going to be difficult, in fact, for anyone to buy and then get permitted when we can't build as many units as we used to have there. They were too tight. The roads were too narrow. People got trapped in the roads because they were so narrow, and cars blocked people's escape during the fire. So when they do figure out the permitting, they're going to have to be careful to have enough space. What I'm preparing to do is I'm preparing additional state land to be a part of settlements and gifts to those who would like to, swap out their land to stay in open space in perpetuity for the people of Hawaii, and let them, have a parcel or 2 parcels up Mauka. That's part of my long-term plan, again, for local people, for people who were, displaced victims of the fire. But I can't say it clearly enough. Our administration, my team, we blocked other people and corporations from sweeping in. The big challenge we will have is if a massive, and I mean massive, bankruptcy occurs and we end up in deep trouble with billions of dollars of debt, and that debt gets bought up by investment banks on the mainland. It's why I'm trying to settle some of these claims generously with local people and keep the investment bankers and those other acquisition types out of Hawaii. And I need help with that. I mean, I need people to stand up and shout that they don't want those kind of acquisitions to occur. So that's our general approach.
One of the other conversations and hot topics in this whole recovery effort is what to do with the debris. And this is a decision and conversation that's happening on the county level within the county council, as well as with the mayor there. But I wanted to get your thoughts about just what you think should happen as this conversation continues about what to do with all this debris, be it local, be it shipped away, where some people say that they don't want it in their backyard and they don't want their significant areas, of course, to the Hawaiian community and just not wanting that type of material within their community. Your thoughts about how this cleanup effort goes and where all of this debris should wind up?
Sure. Of course, no one wants to have debris in their backyard, especially since there were heavy metals involved. I would say this. I don't think we can ship the debris to the mainland or to another country for several reasons. One, we consider the kupuna iwi sacred, and it would be difficult for me to imagine us reversing our position on how we honor those who have passed away. That's one thing. Two, we wouldn't want anyone else shipping their debris to us. So I never, really like a standard that would, be used against us in some other way. That would be something we would all stand up against, right? If someone said they were going to ship their waste over to Hawaii or to Maui. So that's not happening. What I do think is they will probably go to a central Maui landfill. That's my guess. That has to be decided by the council, who I have a lot of respect for, and the mayor. They'll make that decision. This current site is just temporary. I don't think it's going to be a toxic concern for anybody. It's mostly ash and structural debris, and it's going to be buried. So we'll take care of our own responsibilities, and we'll go forward.
I want to turn now to another topic that has been making a lot of headlines in our community, and that is some violence that we saw recently. A young woman attacked near Ala Moana Center. This 25-year-old Chinese teacher is recovering after some severe injuries, but it raises a lot of questions about public safety and the folks that are out on the streets in our community. What can you tell us about how closely you've been tracking that and your thoughts on what happened?
Well, my heart goes out to her. It's a disaster. The circumstance was a guy was released on bail from prison. He was a bad actor. I think he was a drug addict. That's every indication. He got a hold of this strong acid from inside someone's tent on the streets, and because he was not even remotely sane, he attacked this woman. I don't think it was a hate crime at this point. Everything that I've heard suggests it was a horrible random act of violence. I have been in touch with her, this beautiful young woman, and the Chinese government and our White House, and doing what we can for her. Now, she's got a long recovery ahead, and it's tragic, this kind of injury. So we have to support her. I want to say special kudos to the Chinese Chamber of Commerce. They are raising money for her. People should go to their website, Chinese Chamber of Commerce, and if they have resources, donate. They've raised over $150,000 for her. please double down on that to help this woman, because she's going to have to spend a lot of time recovering. You know, our team made sure she got her health insurance activated so that she wouldn't have that part of the cost. And people are stepping up. Also, special thanks to Straub, whose burn unit is amazing, and their nurses are amazing there. Now, what do we have to do? This did trigger a reaction in our team. As you know, we focus a lot on homelessness, and we have these large plans over time to build kauhale, get people off the streets, clear out these structures that are obviously now hosting people that in some cases have weapons or worse. In this case, it was a chemical acid. We have to get rid of that stuff. So I called all of our team together, working hand in hand with Mayor Blangiardi. We've kind of supercharged the teams to build the kauhale much faster. So you're going to see a couple announcements. Middle Street and Windward are going to open very soon. There's a huge facility down in Ivalai that the mayor bought, and he has that for several years until the rail comes through that way. We're going to use that place as what we're calling a triage center, kind of a hot zone, where we will be populating that facility with extra staff, bringing people in and putting them into kauhale or into permanent housing as quickly as we can. So it's going to be a big cleanup effort. Essentially, it will begin on or around March 1st, where we'll launch a lot of this. And we're hoping in 90-day increments to get tons and tons of people, especially first the kupuna and families off the street and veterans. But we also need to spend extra attention, extra healthcare attention on those guys who are really struggling with drugs. And I know they may not like it, but as far as I understand the statute, we are able to compel people to go and come out of those settings off the street, provided we have housing for them. We will be offering housing to people. I mean, I brought a spreadsheet here, which I know John and the mayor's excellent people will go over perhaps next week or the week after when they're with you. But just to highlight a few, Waikiki Vista, 125 units. We'll eventually build the medical respite again in the urban core. We're looking at a very large kauhale out on the west side on some church land that we have donated to us. But I've got about 20 or 25 kauhale sites on this paper that we are ready to go, and we have funding from the legislature. And we just have to house people and then dismantle anything that's a threat to local people. But my heart is broken for this woman, and I don't know if she's ever going to recover completely. And this could have been her sister or a cousin or any of us, any of our children. It could be anybody. And so we've seen a couple incidents over the years. A couple years ago, somebody got stabbed at a bus stop. Remember, a school teacher. There's another case here of another school teacher, and it's just too much. So we've done a few things that are important. We've accelerated loan forgiveness for more behavioral health people. We talked about that last time. You know, we're paying down the loans of social workers and nurses and psychiatrists and psychologists, and those guys will help a lot. We'll have more of them in the state, but people are gonzo on drugs, and these drugs create all kind of delusional disorders, and those are the individuals that are a danger to us.
Well, there's a lot more that we want to discuss with the governor with regards to homelessness and this kauhale plan. Unfortunately, we have to just take a quick break. But coming back, we will talk more with Governor Josh Green here on Spotlight Now as we continue on our conversation about more topics that are impacting the state. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, welcome back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. Joining us once again, of course, is Governor Josh Green, who joins us live in the studio. We ended our conversation just moments ago talking about this incident near Ala Moana Center and this Chinese national that suffered this burn. If you can share just any other information, because we know that you've actually visited her in the hospital, what can you just tell us about where she's at right now, the recovery efforts, and the conversation that you're having directly with her and with those who are helping to care for her?
Sure. So just a couple very gentle things to keep her privacy, protected. She was strong. I saw her just about 3 or 4 days after the injury, the attack, and she was already very aware and already appreciative of the people that were helping her at the hospital, which is incredible. And she demonstrated a really serious inner strength in spite of very tragic circumstances. Her significant other spoke tearfully and passionately about making sure this kind of stuff never happens to other people. And he was absolutely on the mark. She's got a lot of dear friends that are teachers and just buddies here in Hawaii now who are spending hour after hour and day after day at her side. So I can say that in general, under circumstances like this, it takes many months to recover. It would be good of us all to support Straub or her directly, which we are doing, and everyone should do if they can, if it's in their life. It's kind of like our, it's our Aloha spirit, but it's like it's the Aloha insurance plan. We've got to help people if something terrible happens. But I think that she has a very good chance to recover most of the way, but it's going to be so long that it takes, and she's going to be in pain. And so whatever we can do for her, we should. Again, I know the Chinese Chamber of Commerce is rallying people. That's a great way to do it, and the many thousands of viewers on this show should at least think about helping that way. It would be great.
You spoke about the Kauhale opening up and having resources so you would get these encampments off the street so that this kind of activity could not go on. This individual, it's hard to say that they would benefit from a Kauhale. Obviously, they need drug detox and perhaps a stay in the state mental hospital. Yes. What are your thoughts about resources that we have to help these kinds of people? Because especially we had Dr. Champion on here last week. The feeling is that we don't have enough resources to deal with the folks in our community who are facing these issues.
That's correct. The state hospital is not large enough. Even with the new state hospital, we have to refurbish or expand buildings that are on the campus at the Hawaii State Hospital campus Windward. We have to have, and we're building this as we speak, a full healthcare system for those who are socially adrift and who are in the homeless state or in the homeless community. As I've shared with everyone a bunch of times, it's the right thing to do. It's also the right investment for the state, because setting aside this tragedy, many individuals who are on the street for long periods of time run up huge bills in the several $100,000 range per person per year if they're in and out of Queens or Straub or wherever. So the minute you put a roof over their head, their costs drop about 3/4. 73% is what our number has been. And so we have to do that stuff. So it's a good investment. We are building out services right now. Our health department's in partnership with the city to do kind of like a behavioral health site or center for about 25 people. I'm sure that Dr. Champion, who's a great team member, shared that. The Kauhale are necessary, but then for people who need treatment, if they are still shooting up on the streets, which is illegal, they're going to need to be asked to go into treatment. Some of it may have to be here. Some may be on the mainland, wherever we can find treatment beds. And we do have what's called ACT treatment, which is assisted community treatment. So if someone is a menace because they're high on meth and they're potentially threatening to hurt someone, they need to be taken in and be forced/compelled into drug treatment or even incarcerated if they're still a threat. So I'm serious about this, and it's about everyone's civil rights in this particular case. Again, the threshold or standard is you can get people off the street if you provide a housing option, which as a civilized society, we should do that. But heck, I'm just angry that we haven't moved quickly enough over the many years that preceded our opportunity to govern, and so we're going to push hard.
I want to switch gears here and talk a little bit about some of the things that are happening at the state legislature. There are a number of bills that your administration has introduced and are really championing this session and advocating for. One of the things that you tried to do last season, and we've talked about on this show before, is this green fee or this visitor impact fee that has seen variations as you begin and continue on with negotiations with the House and with the Senate. What can you tell us about where things stand right now about this new proposed check-in fee? We're here now; it's more likely to be $25 from what was originally planned, and what this model looks like now, and how things are going in the conversations about something like this actually moving through.
Yeah, no, it's a great question and necessary. So I'm seeing the leadership frequently. I saw them last night. I'm going to be with the whole group again on Friday, I believe. This is what we have to do. We have to have some impact fees from visitors. It can be the $25 fee when people check into a hotel room or short-term rental, or it can be an increase in the TAT, that's the transient accommodation tax, which is honestly the easiest way to go. We have to negotiate that. If we do the $25 fee, it brings about $68 million a year in. If we bring the TAT up, say, to 10% up from the 9.25%, it's not going to damage tourism, especially the way it'll be used. Now, half of that money needs to go towards what we're describing as a disaster insurance fund. That is a going forward fund so that if we ever have another disaster like the Maui wildfire or a hurricane that hits us or what have you, we're protected. And this is an important point. The reason to have that, it's not to bail out anybody, but the reason to have that is because that will make it possible for other people to invest in Hawaii, to come and do energy projects in Hawaii, whether it's HECO or others, anybody. And the same thing goes for building. It's going to be hard to pay for insurance if our insurance market has been blown up by the disaster. So it has to happen on some level. We do have $180 million in the Hurricane Relief Fund. There are pieces of legislation that very savvy legislators have already proposed that could go this direction. That would be a huge help. It's a great idea. And this has to be done intelligently. So it will be. In addition to that, we want to take the other half of the money and do things like you would expect. We need to protect our parks and protect ourselves from sea level rise, do a lot of the things that came out of the report recommendation. I brought a copy of it. So this is the Maui Strong report that the police chief, it's a very well-written report. Many kudos to Chief Pelletier and his team and all the folks on Maui there. They're very candid. It's worth reading, and all of the recommendations they make are sensible. We have to invest in that stuff, though. Like, for example, they ask for us to invest in better cars so that they can clear roads when there's a disaster, a fire, or a tree, or a pole down. Though our poles are now going to be steel, it looks like, so it's going to be less likely. But all this stuff is necessary in here. And I'll tell you, we need money for that because the cost of living is probably our biggest problem in the state of Hawaii as a reflection of housing costs and then just being able to afford to live here. I cannot tax our people more. I have to get revenue from the impact of many millions of travelers here.
So when we're looking at this fee, you talked about allocating some money to the insurance industry or some kind of an insurance fund. And just to get people up to speed, I think this is an issue. We've talked about it on this program. Speaker Psyche and Senate President Kochi also brought it up that we have this sort of looming threat, or very real threat actually, that's happening right now, where certain condos cannot get adequate insurance, and so those owners can then not sell their homes. What is the solution? When we talked about it with Mr. Psyche and Mr. Kochi, they both said that they knew it was a problem, but they couldn't identify at that point what the solution would be. So what is the solution here?
It's a dedicated source of funding into this disaster relief fund and to support the insurance industry, not insurers per se, but that the state lifts up our capacity to pay for premiums. Remember, the state and the counties are often the larger insurers in our geography here. So we have to now protect our market because we've had the volcano erupt more than once. We've had the wildfire, and we've had, as you know, the flood on Kauai. I mean, we've had pretty much every natural disaster you can get. So we need to protect our own market, and that includes protecting housing and condos. So if we put money into funds like this, then we're actually able to attract people to the market. And the reason for that is if the first, say, 1 billion or 1.5 billion is kind of a statewide insurance against a hurricane hitting, Honolulu, or a volcano going the other way and quickly down and taking out part of Kona. I mean, thank God the lava stopped before hitting Hilo last time. Then people will know that it's actually a safe place to insure our condos and our other harbors and everything else, our energy grid, because the state has stepped up. So the idea, very simply, is some of the fees from people traveling here goes into this insurance, model, this disaster insurance fund, and it protects us against people just bailing and only doing insurance and writing insurance policies for safe places or comparatively safe places. There is no volcano in New York. There is no likely hurricane in Nebraska or Chicago. So they will take their business elsewhere if we don't have some kind of solution.
And just to follow up, is there a preference on your end as you talk about this $25 check-in fee that would maybe not generate as much revenue as what you would hope for, as opposed to raising the TAT to 10%? Is there one that you prefer? Or at this point, you're kind of just hoping for a win in either category?
Well, the TAT, if we raised it 0.75%, and total respect to all of the hoteliers, one thing is they wouldn't have to collect something new. Okay, it's already built. Also, 0.75% would be a little over $100 million, which is better than $68 million. I think it's the right way to go. And setting up a whole new mechanism to collect something is pretty onerous. In fact, we may mess it up. So I would rather see us do something that we're good at, which is collecting the TAT. Also, there's the added benefit that TAT should be getting applied much more universally to these deadbeats who are not paying their property taxes or their taxes in general because they're running illegal Airbnbs. Those dudes should be paying their share, and they will be if I have my way. That TAT should be applying to all of them also, so it's an even playing field. So there's a lot we'll be doing to make sure that hotels have a solid footing in the state of Hawaii, but this is a give that probably would be very helpful, and I will tell you, it will really help everybody, including the tourism industry, because if we come to a place where we can't get insurance for our hotels or our larger facilities, we're in deep trouble then. Then we'll just be reacting, and I like to stay out ahead of problems.
We have a comment from a viewer on Facebook, and thank you for those of you who are writing in. Shayla is reacting to what you were talking about, homelessness, and saying that we need more mental health services programs on the Leeward Coast in particular. And she also highlighted the need for housing for seniors and the need for hygiene centers on all of the islands. Housing for seniors is what I want to ask you about. We saw a pretty disturbing report talking about the number of kupuna in our community who are becoming homeless. These are folks who were renters likely for most of their lives, held down a job, and now that they're retired or can no longer work, they're finding themselves homeless for the first time as a senior citizen. What can you tell us about what specific efforts you're doing to target that population?
Yes, so we're on about the 15th, we're going to convene a large group of what I call the Hawaii Health Corps, which is volunteer social workers, nurses, doctors, everyone that has received the loan forgiveness grants, and we're going to ask them to become an army where they go out, reach out to everyone on the street, and we are hoping to quickly give people like virtually a coupon that says you've been approved for the program, and I authorized 200 new Kauhala units yesterday, actually. We're going to find them a direct place to go to get off the street. But permanent housing is probably more important for our kupuna, so we've asked Hakeem, who is just great, to build quickly. That's why we're doing a lot of groundbreakings right now. So we authorized 10,800 units of public housing. And as far as I'm concerned, we need to get every possible bureaucratic obstacle out of his way. Because, if that's one thing we can agree on, is public housing for elderly people. So we're accelerating that for him. Also, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but these ADUs or these Ohana units are quite good for extended family, for seniors who really don't need complex housing. They need simple housing and some family support or friendly support. So I think we should, exercise our prerogative and let that kind of housing be built everywhere. So that's what we're doing. But kupuna are up first. I'm reminded by something that my chief of staff did. She went out. There was a woman named Charlotte who was walking around without any clothes on and had some issues with dementia. Sweet, sweet person. And Brooke went and got her and took her to a kauhale that Auntie Blanche was running. And she lived 2 or 3 years, the rest of her life there, comfortably in a tiny housing unit in a community. That's what a kauhale is. It's a village, and got everything she needed. So we have the capacity to build specialized communities for our kupuna, and I think we should do that. That was a great moment. It's one of the rare quick fixes that you see. Everything else takes a while.
Going to shift a completely different topic, as we like to do. There's just so many things that we want to discuss with the governor, and as we talk about things that are happening within the legislature. Again, the topic of legalization of recreational marijuana always comes up each legislative session. When we talk to the leadership in both the House and Senate, there was just optimism of maybe the Senate would get things together and be able to present the House with a draft of a bill that would really push this through and once and for all legalize marijuana use, recreational use in the state of Hawaii. But there seems to be some pushback still on the House side. Your thoughts about the overall will of the legislature to get this done this session, and then the mechanisms beyond that, because we know that this would be a heavy lift, again, as you mentioned, to start something new. Is this the year where we could see this happening?
Could happen this year. I spent 14 years in the House, Senate, and then 4 years in the lieutenant governorship. And what we only passed then was the medical marijuana program, which leaves something to be desired for a lot of people. I still feel that we should allow adults to choose how they want to behave in every way, as long as they're not hurting other people. And so I would sign a bill if the legislature brought it up to the fifth floor. That was safe, that didn't set a standard that made it too easy for kids to get, marijuana all the time, because they're still developing. People's central nervous system, their brains develop well into their 20s, and you have to be a little careful. That's all. So I don't know if they will pass a bill. I think that our Attorney General has kind of given some basic standards on safety that she'd like to see if we do pass it. I don't think the sky would fall, honestly, if marijuana were legalized, for those out there who are worried about that. I also have some thoughts that marijuana might blunt the effect, if you will, of people on these heavy drugs, these horrible drugs. It is a relative sedative. People are far less violent. They are much hungrier, but they, aside from the snacking and stealing Cheetos, will probably do less harm. So I don't know if they're going to get me a bill. It'll happen eventually. I will tell you this. One proposal that I've made internally, and I'll share with you, is how we had this larger conversation about staying out of people's business on women's reproductive rights. We just said, look, that's between a woman and her doctor, and they would all work it out. I feel that way also about other things like medical marijuana, and the rules have sometimes been restrictive for someone who just chooses to manage their pain or anxiety or nausea with medical marijuana. And so if I had my way, I would lift all those restrictions, so it simply was a matter between a physician and her patient. So, that would be fine too, and that would go a long way. It's not legalization though, so we'll see what they bring me. It's it's the big social issue that remains. I've been pleased that our legislature has kind of been near the cutting edge on most social equality issues. This one is a little more complicated because the feds have not changed the way they schedule marijuana yet, which is really wacko. And then on top of that, we just haven't had a perfected system here. I know that there are some House guys that are really eager to see that bill passed. They must like pot. That's okay.
So we're almost out of time, but Sunday's a big day for a lot of folks. We know that your Steelers are not in the game, but curious to know who you will be rooting for. It also happens to be your birthday on Sunday,
Yes.
So are you doing some kind of a Super Bowl birthday party? Where will you be watching the game, and who will you be cheering for?
I am. I do hate every other team other than the Steelers. as a necessity of life. That's the way we Steeler fans are. I'm watching it at home with my kids, and I'm having a birthday party, which will be cool. Your birthday's the next day, I'd like to mention. And so you're aging too, although much better than I. But yes, it's a Super Bowl party at the Green's house, and I think I'm making chili, and we're going to have ice cream cake. And, you know, I can't root for my own team this time, but I do enjoy the Super Bowl. I think it's fun, and, you know, it's a coin toss. San Francisco looks real good, but Mahomes is lethal, so I don't know what to say.
You know, as we continue on and wrapping up some of this conversation, and as we talk about your time here in office, you just delivered your second State of the State address 2 years in. You know, what do you think at this point has been your most significant accomplishment that you have been able to push through and are most proud of as you reflect back just halfway through this first of these past 4 years?
Yes, so I'm super appreciative of the question. So we're, even though it's the fourth year, because we started in November of 22 rather, it's really only 14 months in. So, but we gave the speech twice. You're right. I would say I am very pleased that we have significantly reset a solid standard for the center part of our society. And when I say that, I'm referring to, we increased teacher salaries a lot, because teachers were leaving the state constantly. It was a deliberate move to help a fundamental piece of society, which is education. Then I turned our attention to healthcare providers, the social workers, nurses, and doctors, and we're forgiving their loans provided they care for the rest of society. That's a total fundamental shift from what the rest of the country does. So those people in this Hawaii Health Corps will care for 750,000 of our citizens, many of whom are on Medicaid. So I'm working on these fundamental changes for society, and if we succeed in getting the next part of our GAP plan, the tax breaks for Alice families, we will have made a really big difference for many, many thousands of people in the state of Hawaii. The next question, obviously, is what do I wish we had more success on? And I wish we had more success and faster success on housing, because I came out of the gate breathing fire with a bunch of emergency proclamations, but it is really difficult to work through the challenges to build housing in Hawaii. And I'm going to continue with that for this whole year with these emergency proclamations, and I'm going to pound the heck out of illegal short-term rentals, because I think that is a way to get some of this housing back to our local families. But there's a ton to do, and like I said, I'm heartsick that we haven't had a perfect record on protecting people, because we should do that. So kudos to the firefighters that fought on Maui. Kudos to the police who save people and who continue to save people. We should all support these guys and keep them in Hawaii.
Okay, well, kudos to you for coming in today. We'll see you in a month and look for an update on all the things we talked about. Thanks so much for being here, and happy early birthday.
Happy birthday to you. I know how old you are, too. So.
Okay, we don't need to tell that. Yeah, we'll be right back.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei-Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders and taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, great conversation there with Governor Josh Green. We covered a lot of topics, especially in the first half of our show, really focusing in on Maui. We heard from the governor really talking about the housing shortage. He said there's about 500 more units that they are still looking to get for those who have been displaced from the fire, and saying that he hopes that he doesn't have to get to the point where he uses the emergency proclamation, but happy with the progress that has been made thus far.
Yeah, and some pretty incredible numbers when it comes to the amount of illegal vacation rentals that are throughout the state. He identified 89,000 vacation rentals total. He said of those, 74,000 are illegal. So expect to see a lot more action on that. And he says that if the legislature does not act to either tax these folks at a very heavy level or do some kind of restriction, that he reserves the right to maybe act through emergency proclamation or some other way. So very interesting to hear about that. Also interesting to note that he has spent some time with that teacher who was injured right near Ala Moana Center in that acid attack, sharing some of the personal stuff and also talking about how this is really fueling his administration to take action on the homeless and mental health issues.
And he put a call out for the community to help in this effort, in the recovery effort, thanking the Chinese Chamber of Commerce for their help thus far in helping to provide support, but asking the community for additional assistance if they're able to provide that support, but also speaking about how this ties into some of the homeless issues that he's been trying to address as governor. This has been an area of the administration that we have seen the governor, and even when he was in the role of lieutenant governor, really try to address over the years, but saying that the addition of the kauhale and the rapid speed at which they are now going to try to produce these types of housing will hopefully help the overall issue.
Yeah, and you heard a lot of emotion too. He said that he's angry about what happened to this young woman, pledging a lot of support and as you said, urging others to support as well. Of course, spending a lot of time talking about Maui as the anniversary, 6 months comes this Thursday. On next Tuesday, right here on Spotlight Now, we will have Mayor Bisson back in the studio.
Yeah, a lot to talk about with the Maui mayor. His second time appearing on this program as we talk about some of those recovery efforts. Talk to him more about not only the housing situation, but also the debris situation that we discuss here with Governor Josh Green about what happens to all that debris, and also get an update on the economy as a whole for the island of Maui that has seen a significant impact because of those wildfires. We, of course, know, as we noted, it is Super Bowl weekend, and we have a team on the ground there in Las Vegas as we leave you with a shot of the new Vegas attraction, the Sphere in Las Vegas.
Impressive there. Lucky to be Casey or Steve. We'll see you next week.